The winter wind was cutting through the quiet suburban street when Derek Holloway stepped out of the black sedan, straightening the collar of his blazer as if he had just finished a respectable business trip. In reality, he had spent the night wrapped in the soft glow of a Manhattan hotel suite, drifting between expensive whiskey and the perfume of his mistress, Madeline. The city lights had made everything feel untouchable, as though consequences could not reach him from across the river. He walked toward the house with the same careless confidence he always carried, the confidence of a man who believed his wife would never leave him, no matter what he did. He had repeated the same line to Madeline hours earlier. "Grace won't go anywhere. She needs me." The sky was still dark, speckled with fading stars as Derek slipped his key into the front door. He twisted, stopped, twisted again. The metal scraped, refusing to turn. He frowned, kneeling to examine the lock. It was new, shining under the porch light he had installed last spring. He was certain of it. Grace wasn't allowed to make changes to the house without his permission. She barely had access to money unless he approved it. Annoyed, he knocked once, twice. "Grace?" No sound, no footsteps, no baby crying. He pounded harder, the cold creeping into his fingertips. Something felt wrong. He stepped back and looked through the narrow window beside the door, where the soft blue glow of the baby's bassinet once illuminated the hallway. The space was empty, his breath caught. He pressed his forehead to the glass and scanned the living room. The framed wedding photo was missing from above the mantel. The diaper bag wasn't hanging on its hook. Even the soft blanket Grace crocheted during pregnancy, the one she refused to let anyone else wash, was nowhere in sight. His pulse climbed up his throat hot and fast. "Grace, open the damn door." From across the street, Lena Brooks stood silently on her porch, holding her mug of coffee close to her chin. She watched Derek, watched the frantic movements of a man suddenly stripped of control. She said nothing. She simply observed, as though she had been waiting for this moment longer than he realized. Derek stepped back, pacing, grabbing his phone. He dialed Grace. The call went straight to voicemail. He checked her location. Disabled. He opened their shared bank app. His screen flashed red. Several charges had been made in Queens. Queens? Grace didn't know anyone there. At least, he thought she didn't. His chest tightened. For the first time in years, Derek felt something unfamiliar, fear. Because if Grace had truly left, if she had taken the baby, she didn't just walk out. She planned, she prepared, she outsmarted him. And that meant something else, something Derek had never imagined in his arrogant certainty. She hadn't simply escaped him. Someone had helped her, and that someone knew exactly how to bring a man like Derek to his knees. Grace Holloway had always carried a softness that people mistook for weakness. At 29, she looked younger than her years, calm eyes, gentle hands, the kind of quiet presence that made frightened newborns settle against her chest when she worked long shifts in the NICU. She had been the nurse families trusted when their babies hovered between life and hope, but in her own home, she was the one tiptoeing around survival. She married Derek at 25, believing she had finally found stability after a childhood shifting between foster homes. He was older, confident, established in his finance job in Manhattan. He seemed like a man who knew what a family should be. For a girl who grew up with no one waiting for her, that was enough to say yes. But marriage turned quickly into something else. Derek started small, suggesting she didn't need a separate bank account, convincing her to use his credit card instead of her own. Then he took her car to sell for something more reliable and never replaced it. Soon she wasn't allowed to visit friends without him driving her, and even at the hospital. She noticed him checking her location more often than he checked on her well-being. Pregnancy didn't soften him. It hardened him. He complained about her morning sickness, called her overdramatic when she bled at 12 weeks, and canceled her prenatal class because he had a meeting. Grace told herself it was stress. She told herself it would get better once the baby arrived. It didn't. She gave birth by emergency C-section while Derek was across the river at a corporate dinner. She remembered gripping the bed rail, terrified, whispering her son's name, Noah, before she even saw his face. She remembered asking the nurse, "Is my husband here yet?" And the nurse's pitying silence being her answer. Derek showed up hours later smelling faintly of the same cologne Grace had once loved. She asked where he had been. He said she was too needy. That was the night she realized she was truly alone. The postpartum weeks blurred together, feeding Noah, pumping milk, healing from surgery, crying quietly in the bathroom when the pain grew too sharp. She tried to be grateful. She had a son, a tiny miracle. But Derek treated the baby like an inconvenience, and every night he came home later, carrying a different kind of energy, colder, distant, glowing faintly with someone else's perfume. Grace sensed the affair long before she had proof. A woman learns to read the temperature of a room. She felt the shift, the withdrawal, the sneaking smiles at his phone. She just never expected the truth to hurt this deeply. But what Derek never understood was that a woman who has survived abandonment her whole life carries a quiet strength, one that doesn't show until the moment she finally refuses to break. And that moment for Grace was coming sooner than anyone, including Derek, could imagine. Because someone new had stepped into her life, someone who noticed her pain even before she admitted it existed. Winter in New Jersey didn't simply bring cold. It brought a kind of stillness that made every secret feel heavier. The Holloway house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every lawn stayed perfectly trimmed and every window glowed with warm yellow lights at dusk. From the outside, it looked like the kind of home people dreamed of: pale brick, a wide porch, a maple tree stretching across the driveway. Neighbors often assumed Grace and Derek were the perfect couple living the perfect American life. But perfection was a thin layer of paint. Inside that house, shadows lingered long after sunset. The living room was decorated exactly how Derek demanded: gray walls, glass tables, expensive art prints he picked out alone. Grace's touches were small: a knitted blanket draped over the couch, a bookshelf with her worn nursing textbooks, a small ceramic bird she'd bought at a street fair before she met Derek. Those gentle pieces always felt out of place, like whispers in a room that no longer welcomed softness. The nursery had once been Grace's favorite space. She painted the walls a calming blue and placed a rocking chair near the window. At night, she'd sit there and imagine Noah's future: birthday parties, messy haircuts, tiny shoes lined near the door. It should have been a sanctuary, but in the weeks after Noah's birth, it became a place where Grace cried most often. The rocking chair turned into a silent witness to her exhaustion and fear. Outside the house, winter raged. But across the river in Manhattan, where Derek spent most nights, the world looked different. Luxury hotel lobbies, Fifth Avenue storefronts, corporate offices with floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a life drenched in brightness, noise, and temptation. A life Derek chose over his wife and newborn. His job in Midtown came with long hours, but also privileges: company-paid dinners, client parties at rooftop lounges, nights where he claimed he was entertaining investors but was actually wrapped in Madeline's arms, convinced no one would ever question him. Manhattan became his playground. New Jersey became his storage closet, a place to keep a wife he barely acknowledged and a child he never truly bonded with. Grace's world, meanwhile, grew smaller. She rarely left the neighborhood, most days stuck indoors with Noah. She couldn't drive. Derek kept the keys. Her bank app required his approval to make transactions. She used to work 12-hour NICU shifts, surrounded by supportive colleagues, but postpartum recovery and Derek's insistence kept her isolated. Her only interactions were with her baby, and occasionally the new neighbor across the street, Lena Brooks. Lena moved into the neighborhood 2 months before Noah was born. She was quiet but observant, the kind of woman who noticed details, like the way Grace flinched when Derek raised his voice, or the nights she paced the porch with Noah, trying to soothe him alone. Lena's background as a former attorney gave her instincts sharper than she let on, and though Grace didn't know it yet, Lena had begun keeping track of things, dates, times, patterns, because she suspected something terrible was happening inside the Holloway home. And soon, very soon, Grace would need someone who saw everything she thought she had hidden. Derek Holloway had always been the kind of man people respected on sight. Polished shoes, tailored suits, that smooth confidence Wall Street culture seemed to breed. At 33, he carried himself like someone who believed the world owed him admiration. And for years, most people, including Grace, gave it to him without question. He worked at a mid-size investment firm in Manhattan, a place where the line between ambition and arrogance blurred long ago. His days were spent in glass-walled conference rooms, his nights drifting through rooftop bars where deals were sealed with expensive whiskey. Derek thrived in that environment. He liked being the loudest voice in the room, the one interns scrambled to impress, the man who walked through the office with the posture of someone untouchable. But he didn't become dangerous until he brought that same attitude home. Behind closed doors, Derek's charm soured. He kept financial control over everything, down to which groceries Grace was allowed to buy. He decided which friends she could see, which shifts she could work, which clothes looked appropriate for a wife. In public, he held her waist affectionately. In private, he held her life tightly in his fist. And then there was Madeline. Madeline Hart, 26, worked under him at the firm, young, ambitious, and drawn to power like a moth to flame. She admired Derek in ways Grace hadn't in a long time, and Derek craved that admiration. With Madeline, he wasn't a husband or a father. He was a man without responsibility, a man adored. A man who could rewrite the parts of himself he didn't want Grace to see. The affair started months before Noah was born. Derek justified it to himself with the same poisonous logic he used for everything. Grace was distant. Pregnancy made her emotional. He deserved peace. He deserved excitement. He convinced himself Grace was lucky he stayed with her at all. His cruelty was never loud. It was sharp, precise, like a blade pressed just close enough to the skin to remind her who held the power. When Grace cried quietly after giving birth alone, he told her she was too sensitive. When she asked why he came home late, he accused her of being ungrateful. And when she tried to talk about loneliness, he dismissed her with a wave of his hand. But beneath all his polished control, Derek carried one fatal flaw. He underestimated everyone. He underestimated Grace's endurance. He underestimated her ability to plan. And most dangerously, he underestimated the people paying attention around him. Because while Derek believed he was manipulating the world, another narrative had been unfolding behind his back. His arrogance blinded him to something growing quietly, something he would never see coming. And the first crack in Derek's perfect life would come from the last person he expected to challenge him. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those bitter winter nights, when the cold cuts straight through a coat and every breath feels heavy. Grace was in the kitchen warming a bottle for Noah, humming softly to keep him calm. The house was dim, quiet, and for a moment she allowed herself to pretend everything was normal. Then Derek came home. He slammed the front door so hard the frame shook. Grace froze, instinctively pulling Noah closer. She knew that sound. It meant Derek wasn't coming from work. It meant he'd been with her. Madeline. His footsteps were uneven, his tone loud before he even reached the hallway. "Grace, where the hell is my blue tie?" She kept her voice steady. "In the laundry room. I set it aside." "Of course you did," he snapped, stepping into the kitchen with eyes that carried the arrogance of a man returning from somewhere he shouldn't have been. His cologne was mixed with a floral scent Grace didn't wear. Her stomach twisted. He looked at Noah in her arms and rolled his eyes. "He's always crying. You're coddling him." "He's a newborn, Derek," she whispered. "That's your excuse for everything." His voice grew sharper, slicing through the air. "You think taking time off work means you get to be lazy all day? I bust my ass in Manhattan while you sit here and complain." Grace felt the familiar sting behind her eyes but refused to cry. Not this time. "Can we not do this in front of Noah?" Derek scoffed, turning away. "Maybe if you were prettier or more fun, I wouldn't have to spend so much time entertaining clients." The words hit her like ice water. He didn't even try to hide it anymore. Grace inhaled shakily. "I know about her." Silence fell. A dangerous silence. Derek turned back slowly, his expression twisting, not with guilt, but with annoyance, as if she had inconvenienced him. "Know about who?" "Madeline," Grace said softly. "I saw the charges, the hotel receipts, the messages on the iPad." For a moment his jaw clenched, then he laughed. Not the warm laugh he used when they first met, but a cold, cruel sound. "You're lucky I stay with you," he said. "Who else would want a woman like you? Who else would take care of you? Without me, you're nothing." The words cut deeper than any insult he had ever thrown at her. Noah began to cry, startled by the rising tension. Grace rocked him gently, trying to shield him with her body. Derek stepped closer as if to tower over her, but before he could take another step, a sharp knock echoed on the front door. 3 knocks, firm, intentional. Both of them turned. Grace felt her heart stop, because only one person knocked like that, and only one person would come at a moment like this, someone who had been watching far longer than Derek ever realized. The knocking didn't stop. 3 steady hits against the door, measured, unwavering, like someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Grace's breath stuttered. She clutched Noah tightly, her pulse racing in her ears. Derek shot her a glare before stomping toward the entryway. "Who the hell is bothering me at this?" He yanked the door open. Lena Brooks stood on the porch, wrapped in a long charcoal coat, snow clinging to her dark curls. Her expression was calm. Almost too calm. She wasn't holding coffee this time. She wasn't pretending this was a friendly visit. She looked straight at Grace with a question in her eyes. "Do you need help?" Grace swallowed, unable to speak. She didn't dare. Derek forced a tight smile. "Can I help you?" Lena didn't blink. "I heard shouting. I wanted to make sure Grace and the baby are safe." The word safe landed like a blade. Derek's smile cracked. "We're fine. You can go." Grace's heart hammered. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run into Lena's arms and say, "Please don't leave." But Noah whimpered against her neck, and the shiver running through her body kept her frozen. Fear wasn't new, but tonight it felt heavier, tangible, like something closing around her throat. Lena didn't move. "Grace, do you need anything?" Derek stepped between them. "She doesn't speak for herself. I said we're fine." Grace saw it, the shift in Lena's eyes, sharp, calculating, as if she understood everything Grace was too frightened to say. But Lena also understood timing, and tonight wasn't the night to escalate. Not yet. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. "If you need me, Grace, I'm right across the street." The emphasis wasn't subtle. Derek slammed the door so hard the baby startled. Grace rocked him frantically, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." But her hands shook so violently she almost dropped the bottle. Derek turned on her. "Did you tell her to come?" "No," Grace whispered. "She's nosy. I don't want you talking to her anymore." Grace looked down, nodding automatically, but something inside her cracked. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a small fracture inside her chest where exhaustion and fear sat like stones. Derek stormed upstairs, muttering under his breath. When she finally heard the bathroom door slam shut, Grace collapsed on the kitchen floor. Her legs couldn't hold her. She held Noah close, tears spilling freely now. The weight of it all pressed down. The isolation, the insults, the betrayal, the fear that she wasn't strong enough to leave, the terror that one wrong step could cost her everything. She didn't sob like someone breaking apart. She cried like someone drained of everything she once believed she was. In that moment, she saw herself clearly, a woman trapped in a house that looked perfect from the outside but felt like a cage from the inside. She didn't know how to leave. She didn't know where to go. She didn't even know who she was anymore. But as she rocked Noah and whispered apologies into his tiny hair, one truth cut through the fog. If she stayed, she would disappear, piece by piece, quietly, permanently, and deep inside the exhaustion, buried under layers of fear, something small but fierce stirred, something Derek never expected Grace to feel toward him. Grace didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. After Derek finally staggered into bed, she sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, Noah resting against her chest. Her mind was a storm, fear, shame, exhaustion, but underneath it all, something new pulsed like a heartbeat she didn't recognize. Resolve. Her tears had dried into thin lines on her cheeks. She felt empty, but in a strange, steady way, like the calm that comes when a wound stops bleeding and begins to scar. Just after 2 a.m., she heard her phone buzz inside the diaper bag Derek always ignored. She reached quietly, afraid even the zipper sound would wake him. It was a message from an unknown number. "Grace, it's Lena. I didn't want to leave you tonight without making sure you're all right. If you ever need a safe place, call me. Anytime." No questions asked. Grace covered her mouth to stifle the sob that tried to break free. No one had spoken to her like that in years. No one had offered help without wanting something in return. But before she could respond, another message appeared, this time from a contact she hadn't seen in months. Dr. Calvin Pierce. "Grace, I heard you took extended leave after the birth. I've been worried. Please tell me you and the baby are okay." Her breath caught. Calvin. He had been the attending physician in the NICU where she worked, steady, compassionate, always protective of his staff. During her pregnancy, he was the only one who noticed her fading energy, the bruised spirit she tried to hide. He once pulled her aside after a shift and quietly asked, "Grace, is everything safe at home?" She lied then. Now she wished she hadn't. She typed a response but deleted it over and over, unsure what she was allowed to say. Derek had taken so much control that even texting felt like rebellion. Noah stirred, and she kissed the top of his tiny head. Then something happened that changed everything. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail alert. From Derek. Grace stared at it, confused. He was upstairs. Why would he? Curiosity pushed her to press play. What she heard wasn't Derek's voice. It was Madeline's, breathy, laughing, recorded in the background. Then Derek's voice came through clearly. "She'll never leave. Grace is too pathetic for that. She needs me. She's nothing without me." Grace froze. Her chest tightened. Her throat burned. Her vision blurred. She played it again and again. The cruelty wasn't new, but hearing him say it with such certainty, such disgust, ignited something sharp inside her. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt anger, power, the spark of a woman who had been underestimated one time too many. She forwarded the voicemail to herself, then another email account Derek didn't know existed. A seed planted, a weapon stored. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear. For the first time in years, she had leverage. Grace pressed Noah closer, whispering into his soft, warm hair. Mommy's going to protect you. I promise. I won't let him hurt us anymore. She stood slowly, steadying herself on the counter. Because she finally understood something life-changing. Derek wasn't as untouchable as he believed he was, and now she had proof. But Grace had no idea that this voicemail, this tiny piece of audio, would unlock a truth far darker than cheating. A truth Derek had been hiding long before she ever met him. Morning arrived quietly, but inside, something had changed so dramatically she barely recognized herself. The woman who woke up was not the same one who cried on the kitchen floor the night before. Something sharper had taken root, like the final click of a lock she didn't know she possessed. She waited until Derek left for work, slamming the door behind him in his usual performance of superiority. His car reversed down the driveway, tires crunching through snow, and the moment he turned the corner, Grace exhaled the first full breath she'd taken in months. She moved quickly. First, she grabbed the knife-thin folder she had hidden beneath Noah's dresser. Hospital papers, bank notices, screenshots of suspicious charges Derek made between Manhattan and Brooklyn. She added the voicemail recording, printed out the hotel receipts she had quietly emailed herself weeks ago, and tucked it all into a diaper bag beneath baby blankets. Then she stood in front of the mirror. Her reflection startled her. Tired, pale, smaller than she remembered. But her eyes looked alive. She brushed her hair back and pulled it into a neat ponytail. She changed into jeans, a clean sweater, and zipped Noah into his warmest onesie. There was something ceremonial about it, almost sacred, like preparing both of them not just to leave the house, but to leave a life. She wrapped Noah in his blanket, locked the front door behind her, and walked across the street. Snowflakes dusted her shoulders as she knocked on Lena's door. It opened instantly. Lena didn't ask questions. She pulled Grace inside, shut the door, and only then whispered, "What happened?" Grace handed her the folded papers and played the voicemail. Lena's jaw tightened. "Grace, this is abuse. This is control. And it's criminal." Grace swallowed. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do," Lena said gently. "You're just scared to admit it." Grace looked down at Noah, then back at Lena. "I need help," she whispered. Those were the words that changed everything. Lena guided her to the couch, made her tea, and pulled out a notebook. "We're going to make a plan, not just to leave, but to win." Grace blinked. "Win?" "Yes," Lena said, her voice steady with conviction. "You're not just escaping Derek. You're taking your life back." They called Dr. Calvin Pierce next. When he answered, his tone softened instantly at the sound of her voice. Grace explained everything, quietly, shakily, but she didn't cry. Not this time. Calvin listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said only one thing. "Grace, you and Noah deserve safety. Tell me where you are. I'm coming." Something warm flickered in her chest, unfamiliar but comforting. Over the next few hours, Lena helped Grace document everything. Timestamps, financial records, the voicemail, photos of bruises she had hidden even from herself. Grace felt strangely powerful, as if each piece of evidence erased another inch of the fear that had lived inside her for so long. She wasn't the same woman anymore. She felt it in her spine, in the steadiness of her hands, in the clarity of her breath. And when she finally looked at Noah sleeping peacefully in Lena's arms, Grace knew. She wasn't just leaving. She was transforming. But the transformation had a price, and soon Derek would realize he hadn't just lost control of his wife. He'd awakened a version of Grace he was never prepared to face. Snow fell in slow spirals that Saturday evening, blanketing the neighborhood with a deceptive calm. But inside the Holloway house, Derek's kingdom of control, something was about to shatter. Grace wasn't there anymore, yet her presence lingered like a ghost he couldn't erase. At exactly 6:12 p.m., Derek stepped out of his Mercedes with 2 shopping bags from an upscale boutique in Manhattan. Gifts for Madeline. He was humming, smug with the certainty that his life was still fully in his hands. Grace was probably inside feeding the baby, he thought. She'd cry, apologize, beg for forgiveness like she always did. He inserted his key into the front door. It didn't turn. Again. Still locked. Still changed. A pulse of irritation ran through him. He slammed his fist against the door. "Grace, open the damn door!" Silence. He grabbed his phone, ready to yell, ready to demand, and noticed something strange. His notifications were flooded with emails. Dozens of them. Documents, screenshots, statements, voicemails sent to him. From his own company and from legal counsel. His heart stuttered. He opened one email. It was a forwarded voicemail. His voicemail, loud and clear. "She's nothing without me." Another email. Hotel receipts from nights he claimed to be working late. Another, screenshots of his private messages with Madeline. Another, a report from HR about workplace misconduct and power imbalance. His legs weakened. Someone had exposed him. Then he saw it. The email signature at the bottom of the message thread. Calvin Pierce, MD, Child Welfare Consultant, Lena Brooks, Eskerner, Family Law Advocate. His blood turned cold. He stepped back from the porch, gripping the railing to steady himself. No, this isn't happening. That's when headlights washed over him. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the curb. The door opened, and Lena stepped out first. Calm, collected, wearing the same charcoal coat she wore the night she knocked on his door. Calvin exited next, carrying a folder under his arm. Not far behind him, a police cruiser slowed to a stop. Derek's throat tightened. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Lena didn't flinch. "Serving justice." Calvin didn't raise his voice, but the authority in his tone silenced the entire street. "Grace and Noah are safe, and as of tonight, you are temporarily suspended from all parental rights pending investigation." "In what?" Derek choked out. "Grace wouldn't do this. She wouldn't." "She didn't," Lena said. "You did. Every lie, every receipt, every threat, you built this case yourself." Before Derek could argue, the police officer approached him. "Mr. Holloway, we need you to step aside. You're being served with a protective order." The world spun. His neighbors peeked from behind curtains. Porch lights flicked on across the street. Phones recorded. The perfect husband mask Derek wore for years fell apart under those lights. He lunged forward, pointing at Lena. You poisoned her against me!" Lena lifted a brow. "She didn't need poisoning. She needed clarity." "And she finally got it," Calvin added. Derek's voice cracked. "Where is she? Where's my wife?" Calvin exchanged a subtle glance with Lena before answering. "She's not your wife anymore. She's a mother protecting her child." Then Calvin stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to let Derek feel every word. "And she's not coming back." The officer read Derek his restrictions as snow kept falling, soft, steady, like the sky itself was erasing him. And somewhere far from that house, Grace held Noah in her arms. Unaware that her first strike had landed harder than anyone expected, and Derek's downfall had only just begun. Grace hadn't planned on ending up in Boston, but life has a way of leading the broken toward the places where they can finally breathe again. 3 weeks after the protective order was served, she and Noah settled into a small but sunlit apartment overlooking the Charles River, an apartment Calvin helped her find through a colleague who owed him a favor. Every morning she opened the curtains and let daylight spill across the hardwood floors. It felt symbolic, almost healing, like she was inviting light into corners that had been dark too long. Her days slowly found rhythm. She began virtual NICU chart reviews for a hospital she once dreamed of working in. She took walks with Noah bundled tightly against her chest, his soft breaths warming the scarf near her collarbone. And at night, when loneliness tried to creep in, She reminded herself she wasn't alone anymore, not emotionally, not legally, not spiritually. One afternoon, while Noah napped, she sat at the kitchen table sorting through legal paperwork. She paused, fingers brushing the edge of the manila folder Lena and Calvin had put together. The documents that saved her. She exhaled softly. She had survived. She had escaped, and she had rebuilt. But the real miracle wasn't escape, it was rediscovery. There was a soft knock at her door, not frantic like Derek's, not demanding, gentle, familiar. Calvin. He stepped inside with a calm smile, shaking snow from his coat. "I brought something for you," he said, holding up a small brown paper bag. She raised an eyebrow. "More baby formula?" "Nope," he chuckled. "An actual treat for you, Grace." She peeked inside. A warm blueberry muffin from the cafe downstairs and a folded note. She opened it slowly. "You deserve soft days, real safety, and a future you choose. C." Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warm and terrifying in its tenderness. She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "Calvin, why are you doing all this?" He met her gaze, steady and unashamed. "Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and because somewhere along the way, I started caring about you. Deeply." Grace swallowed hard. The old version of her, the one who lived small, afraid, shrinking, would have backed away. But this Grace, the one who walked through fire and came out standing, did not flinch. Instead, she whispered, "I'm not ready for anything big yet." Calvin nodded. "I'm not asking for big. I'm asking if I can stand beside you while you heal." Her breath shook. "Yes, I'd like that." He smiled, a real, gentle smile that reached his eyes, the kind of smile Derek never gave her. At that exact moment, Noah stirred in his crib, letting out a soft cry. Calvin stepped back, letting her move toward her son first. Respectful, patient. As she lifted Noah into her arms, feeling his warmth against her chest, a powerful truth settled into her bones. She wasn't nothing. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't alone. She was Grace Holloway, survivor, mother, woman reborn. And Derek? He was a closed chapter, facing consequences he wrote for himself. Grace kissed Noah's forehead and whispered, half to him, half to herself, "We're free now. And we're going to build something beautiful." And for the first time in her life, Grace believed those words with her whole heart. Derek Holloway had always believed the world bent for him. Bosses, co-workers, women, even time itself. But 3 weeks after Grace disappeared, he woke every morning into a life he no longer controlled. The silence inside the New Jersey house pressed against him like a weight. No crying baby, no footsteps, no soft voice asking if he wanted dinner. Just emptiness and consequences. Lots of them. His phone buzzed relentlessly with emails from HR, legal warnings, and mandatory review meetings. Madeline hadn't contacted him in days. She'd blocked his number, unfollowed him on Instagram, erased every trace of him from her world, as if she'd never existed in his. Derek tried calling her office only to hear she had taken a leave of absence. People whispered when he walked through the firm. Interns avoided eye contact. Colleagues stopped inviting him to client dinners. His name wasn't powerful anymore. It was toxic. Then came the official notice. He was suspended indefinitely. It hit him harder than losing Grace. His job was his identity. Without it, he wasn't the confident Derek Holloway. He was a man standing on cracked ice. That afternoon, he drove home with shaking hands gripping the steering wheel. Snow piled on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear. He parked crookedly in the driveway, barely remembering how he got there. Inside the house, he poured himself a drink. Cheap whiskey now, because he couldn't expense the good stuff. He stared at the mantel where their wedding photo used to be. The blank space taunted him. His phone buzzed. At first, he ignored it, Then he glanced at the screen, a notification from Child Protective Services, another from his attorney, then a third from an unknown number. He opened it. A single line. "You built the wreckage. Don't blame the fire." No signature, but he knew exactly who sent it. Lena. He hurled the glass across the room. It shattered against the wall, whiskey dripping down the paint like something bleeding. He sank onto the couch, hands gripping his hair. "How did I lose everything?" he whispered to the empty room. He thought of Grace, not with affection, but with bruised ego. She was supposed to stay. She was supposed to forgive him. She was supposed to be waiting when he came home. He replayed her final moments in the house, her quiet breath, her lowered eyes. He'd mistaken silence for submission, but now he understood. Silence had been strategy. And then, another thought slithered in. Who helped her? Not Grace. He was sure she wasn't clever enough on her own, not after years of leaning on him for everything. He stood abruptly. "No," he muttered. "Someone pushed her. Someone poisoned her mind." He paced the living room like a cornered animal, heart pounding, breath sharp. Lena, Calvin, someone else maybe. He didn't know, but he was certain of one thing. He wasn't going down alone. He grabbed his coat, slammed the door behind him, and marched toward his car with a new, dangerous resolve hardening in his expression. Grace had taken their child, taken his reputation, taken control he once believed was unshakable. Now, Derek was ready to strike back, messy, reckless, desperate. And the man who once lived above consequences was about to start chasing the one thing slipping fastest from his grasp: power. Derek drove through the slushy New Jersey streets with a fury that made his tires slip on every turn. His jaw clenched so tight it ached. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed someone to blame, someone to corner, someone to punish for the downfall he swore wasn't his fault. He headed toward Manhattan, where the mess had begun. The firm's glass tower loomed like a judgmental giant. Derek stormed through the lobby, ignoring the security guard calling after him. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor dinging like a countdown. When the doors opened onto the 27th floor, the whispered conversations halted instantly. Everyone stared. It wasn't admiration this time. It was the kind of stare people gave a car accident, horrified, fascinated, grateful it wasn't them. He barged into his old office, only to find boxes stacked neatly beside the desk. His assistant, pale and startled, stood up shakily. "Mr. Holloway, HR said you aren't supposed to—" "Where's Madeline?" he demanded. Her gaze darted away. "She's not here." He grabbed one of the boxes, sending papers spilling across the carpet. "Don't lie to me. I know she's behind some of this." The assistant swallowed. "She filed a complaint." Derek froze. "What?" "A formal complaint," she repeated. "For coercion. Inappropriate pressure for personal favors in exchange for professional advancement." His stomach flipped. "That's insane," he snapped. "She begged me for attention. I didn't pressure." But as he spoke, another voice cut through the air. "I guess that depends on who's telling the story." Derek spun around. Madeline stood in the doorway. Perfect makeup, perfect posture, but her eyes were ice. "You set me up," Derek growled. "No," she replied calmly. "You set yourself up. I'm just choosing not to sync with you." "You told HR?" he spat. She shrugged, unbothered. "I told them the truth. They found plenty of supporting evidence." He stepped closer, voice low and venomous. "You wouldn't have anything without Grace. She poisoned you, too." Madeline blinked slowly, as if astonished at the stupidity of the accusation. "Grace?" she said. "The woman you abandoned in labor? The woman you called pathetic? Derek, she didn't poison me. Watching you destroy her did." Something shifted in the office. Even the walls seemed to pull back. recoiling from him. He tried to grab her arm. She stepped back. "Don't!" Security appeared behind her a second later. "Mr. Holloway," one guard said evenly, "you need to leave." "This isn't over," Derek barked, but as they escorted him out, the buzzing of his phone nearly vibrated out of his pocket. A new email from an unknown address. Subject line, "Financial investigation. Urgent." His blood ran cold. The message was short. "Your accounts, transfers, and client reports are under review. Expect contact from federal authorities. Attachments loaded, screenshots, ledger summaries, flagged transfers, numbers Grace had never seen. But someone else clearly had. He recognized the format. He recognized the handwriting in the scanned notes. Calvin Pierce. A doctor, who somehow knew enough to expose financial crimes Derek thought he'd buried years ago. Suddenly, Derek realized this wasn't Grace's doing. Not entirely. Someone smarter, calmer, and much more dangerous was pulling strings. And Derek wasn't used to being outplayed. He stepped into the freezing Manhattan air, breath shaking. For the first time in his life, he felt hunted. And the worst part? He still had no idea just how much more he was about to lose. Grace sat at the small wooden table in her Boston apartment, the soft hum of the heater blending with Noah's gentle breathing from his bassinet. Snow dusted the window, settling on the sill like powdered sugar. It should have been peaceful, but tonight the air felt electric, purposeful, heavy with everything she was about to do. Lena had warned her, "Gather everything. Don't rush, don't panic, build the truth piece by piece." So Grace did. She began with the folder she'd carried from New Jersey, the one hidden beneath Noah's dresser. She laid out each document carefully. Hospital bills. Derek refused to pay. Credit card charges from restaurants in Manhattan she never visited. Hotel receipts with dates matching nights he'd accused her of being overly emotional. Her hands still trembled. But it wasn't from fear. It was from awakening. She opened her laptop, her old Nike-issued one she kept forgotten in a closet. For the first time in years, she logged into the shared cloud storage Derek thought she'd never access again. Her heart pounded as files loaded. There they were, hundreds of them. Photos of nights out, screenshots from Madeline, receipts from lounges and hotel bars. Even private notes Derek typed to himself, rants about work, crude remarks about co-workers, and entries that made her stomach twist. Calculations of money he hid, money he transferred, money that didn't match his reported income. This wasn't infidelity anymore. This was fraud. Grace copied everything into a secure drive. She created backups, even hid a USB behind a loose floorboard under the bathroom cabinet. Derek had taught her paranoia in the worst way, but now she used it with precision. Hours passed. Then she opened the last folder, something she never expected to find. Audio recordings, not hers, not Madeline's. They were recordings Derek made during phone calls with clients, some legal, many not, but one file made her blood turn to ice. "Move the money through the second account. Grace won't notice. I cut off her access. If anyone asks, blame the maternity leave. She won't fight it." Her breath shook. This wasn't just a bad husband. This was a man who built his life on manipulation, theft, and the assumption that she'd remain too broken to expose him. Grace pressed a hand to her forehead, overwhelmed for a moment. The weight of everything threatened to crush her. The trauma, the fear, the betrayal. It all pressed in at once, suffocating. She closed her eyes, just for a second. Noah whimpered softly, stirring in his sleep. Grace looked at him, at his tiny fingers curled in innocence, at the soft rise and fall of his chest. Something inside her steadied, rooted. She inhaled deeply and exhaled even deeper. She wasn't collecting evidence for herself. She was protecting her son. She was rewriting both their futures. The laptop pinged, a notification from Calvin. Grace, I'll be in Boston tomorrow. There's something you need to see. She reread the message twice. Something she needed to see? Something he hadn't told her yet? A flicker of fear rippled through her, but not toward Calvin. It was the feeling of a woman standing at the edge of a truth larger than betrayal, larger than marriage, larger than anything she'd imagined. She closed the laptop slowly and whispered to the empty room. Whatever it is, I'm ready. But Grace had no idea that the truth Calvin carried would not only strengthen her case, it would reveal the darkest secret Derek ever hid. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of Boston morning where the sky felt too close and the world too quiet. Grace barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the audio files, the documents, the lies Derek built like bricks around her life. Noah's soft breathing was the only thing anchoring her to the moment. At 9:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. Calvin. I'm downstairs. She closed her eyes, steadying herself before opening the door. Calvin stood in the hallway, snowflakes caught in his dark hair, a file tucked under one arm and a paper cup of warm tea in the other. His eyes softened the moment he saw her. You haven't slept, he said quietly. Grace gave a small, tired smile. Not really. He stepped inside, brushing the snow off his coat. The warmth of the apartment embraced him, and for a moment, it felt like he'd been there 100 times before. Familiar, steady, safe. Noah stirred in his bassinet, and Calvin walked over naturally, gently placing a hand on the side as if comforting the baby without waking him. Grace watched, always surprised how gentle he was, how easily he stepped into the spaces Derek never filled. Grace, Calvin said, turning back toward her, there's something you need to know, something I didn't want to overwhelm you with until you had time to breathe. Her stomach tightened. Is it about the documents? In a way, he replied, but it's more than that. He placed the file on the kitchen table. The folder wasn't thin, it wasn't simple, it looked heavy. Too heavy. Grace sat down slowly. Calvin took the chair across from her, leaning in just enough that she knew he wasn't going anywhere. You know Derek was involved in financial misconduct, Calvin began, but what you didn't know is that someone already flagged his activity months ago. Grace blinked. Months ago? By who? By me, Calvin said gently. Her breath caught. You. He nodded. I noticed discrepancies in the medical billing from the NICU, charges meant for families that somehow got redirected. I didn't want to involve you while you were pregnant, but I started looking into the names tied to the transactions. He paused. One of them was Derek. Grace's throat tightened. So you knew he was lying even before I did. I suspected, Calvin corrected. But what I found yesterday? He opened the folder, sliding a document toward her. This is why I rushed to Boston. Grace scanned the page. Her hands trembled. It was a list, transfers, accounts, dates, and next to one account name, a name she recognized, her own. That account, she whispered. I didn't open it. I know, Calvin said softly. Derek did, in your name, years ago. The room spun. Grace felt her chest constrict. Tears gathering before she could hold them back. She wasn't crying from fear this time, but from the suffocating realization that Derek had built his lies deeper than she ever imagined. Calvin reached across the table, his hand covering hers, warm, steady, grounding. Grace, he whispered. He wasn't just controlling you. He was using you to hide money. But now that we found it, you're not just a victim in this case. You're a key witness. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face, overwhelmed by the weight of betrayal and the sudden rush of clarity. Calvin moved beside her, not touching, simply sitting close enough for her to feel supported. You're not alone, he said. You have Lena. You have me, and you have the truth. Grace looked up, her eyes red but determined. I thought I was weak, she whispered. No, Calvin said softly. You were surviving. She inhaled deeply, steadying her voice. What do we do now? Calvin closed the folder gently. Now, Grace, we fight back. And the next move would hit Derek harder than anything he'd ever seen coming. Derek spent the night pacing through the cold rooms of the New Jersey house, unable to stop replaying the humiliation he suffered at the firm. Every shadow felt like an accusation. Every quiet corner reminded him of what used to be his. A wife who obeyed, a home that bowed to him, a reputation that never cracked. By sunrise, rage simmered beneath his skin like a fever. He had convinced himself Grace wasn't smart enough to plan an escape on her own, and she certainly wasn't brave enough to leave without help. So who helped her? He replayed every recent moment in his mind. The neighbor with the too sharp eyes, the doctor who asked too many questions. And then it clicked. Lena, Calvin, two people who had no business in his marriage, two people who dared stand between him and the life he controlled. His jaw flexed. He would find Grace. He would bring her back. He would reclaim what was his. He started with the last traceable piece of information Grace ever left behind, the hospital bill. He logged into their shared insurance portal, one of the few systems he still had access to, and found the final charge routed through Boston General. Boston? Grace had no ties to Boston. His pulse quickened. He grabbed his keys and drove through the icy morning, speeding toward the hospital, even though he had no plan. Every traffic light, every slow driver, every red stop ignited his fury further. He was losing control, and Derek Holloway did not lose control. The hospital lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee. He marched straight to the reception desk. I'm here for my wife, he said. Grace Holloway. She was treated here recently. The receptionist typed something, then frowned. Sir, I'm not finding that name in our system. He leaned closer. Try again, she was here. Another search, another shake of the head. She isn't listed. He slammed his palm on the counter. Check under a different last name. She lies. A deeper voice came from behind him. Interesting choice of words, Derek. Derek's blood turned to ice. He turned slowly. Calvin stood there, coat open, hands in his pockets, expression controlled but edged with steel. He was taller than Derek remembered, sharper, and not alone. Lena stepped out from behind him, folding her arms. You really think it's smart to cause a scene in a hospital under investigation for financial discrepancies you caused? Derek's face darkened. Where is she? Calvin didn't flinch. Safe. You don't get to decide that, Derek barked. No, Calvin replied calmly. Grace decided it herself. You just never believed she could. Derek lunged forward, but Calvin stepped in front of him effortlessly. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't need to. His presence was enough. You need to leave, Calvin said quietly, evenly. Grace doesn't want contact. She has legal protection. Derek laughed, a broken, ugly sound. You think a piece of paper can stop me? Lena stepped closer, eyes cold. No, but the federal investigation will. For a moment, Derek's bravado cracked. Just a flicker, but enough for Calvin to see fear spark behind his eyes. Derek swallowed, trying to rebuild his mask. Tell her I'm not done. Calvin leaned in, his voice low and unshakable. You are. You just don't know it yet. Security approached. Derek backed away slowly, eyes burning with a mixture of rage and panic. He turned sharply and stormed out of the hospital lobby, snow whipping around him as if the world itself pushed him away. And as the doors slid shut behind him, Calvin exchanged a look with Lena, because Derek's desperation was growing, and desperate men were the most dangerous of all. Grace sat in the quiet conference room of a small Boston law office, her fingers gently stroking Noah's blanket as he slept in the carrier beside her. The room smelled faintly of old books and peppermint tea, a strangely comforting contrast to the storm she knew was coming. Lena sat on her left, calm and composed, while Calvin took the seat across from her, protective as always. A moment later, the door opened and Attorney Samuel Hartley stepped inside. Mid-40s, sharp suit, steady gaze, the kind of lawyer who didn't waste breath on anything unnecessary. He shook Grace's hand firmly. "Grace, I've reviewed everything you sent," he said. "And I'll be honest, this is one of the strongest domestic and financial abuse cases I've seen in years." Grace tensed. "Strong enough to protect Noah?" Samuel nodded. "Strong enough to protect both of you, and to make sure Derek never gets to use you again." Calvin leaned forward. "Tell her what you told me on the phone." Samuel opened the thick folder in front of him. "We're filing a comprehensive restraining order, full custody request, and submitting evidence to federal investigators. Derek's not just dealing with family court anymore. He's facing financial charges that could escalate to prison time." Grace swallowed hard. "Prison?" "Yes," Samuel said calmly. "Embezzlement, tax evasion, fraud using your identity." He tapped the papers. "He left a footprint on everything. He thought you'd never find it." Grace's breath wavered, but not from fear, from stunned relief. For the first time, the future she imagined for Noah didn't feel impossible. It felt reachable. Lena placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You're not the one who should be scared." Samuel slid a signature page toward Grace. "Once you sign, we begin." Grace reached for the pen, hesitating only for a heartbeat, the ghost of her old life tugging weakly at her wrist. Then she signed, bold, unshaking. Calvin exhaled quietly. Lena smiled with fierce pride. "It's done," Samuel said. "Now, we prepare for Derek's response." Grace frowned. "He went to the hospital yesterday. He's getting desperate." "He'll get more desperate before he collapses," Samuel warned. "Men like him always do." Just then, right on cue, Grace's phone buzzed violently. A text from Derek, a single line dripping with rage. "You think you can hide? I know you're using them to turn Noah against me." Grace's heart lurched, not from fear anymore, but from something new. Disgust, clarity, strength. She handed the phone to Samuel. "Use it." He scanned the message and smiled coldly. "With pleasure." They spent the next hour outlining everything: courtroom strategy, federal coordination, locations to avoid, emergency contacts. Calvin promised to stay in Boston until everything stabilized. Lena arranged a safety plan. But Grace, quiet, steady Grace, surprised them all when she spoke. "I don't want to hide anymore." Everyone stopped. "I want him to see me in court," she continued softly but firmly. "I want him to know I'm not afraid." Calvin's eyes softened with unmistakable admiration. "You won't be alone." Grace nodded, a fire settling behind her ribs. She was no longer the trembling woman in the kitchen. She was something new, formed in pain, strengthened in truth. As the meeting ended, Samuel gathered the evidence. "Once this is filed, Derek will come face to face with consequences he's avoided for years." Grace stood, lifting Noah into her arms. "Good," she whispered. Because for the first time she wasn't running. She was fighting, and Derek Holloway was about to learn what a cornered, reborn woman was capable of. Vanessa Hart had avoided Derek's calls for days, hiding behind carefully crafted silence. But silence couldn't shield her forever, because in Manhattan, rumors spread faster than snowmelt, and by the time Derek's scandal exploded across the firm, Vanessa found herself pulled into a spotlight she never asked for. She sat in a quiet corner of a midtown cafe, stirring a lukewarm latte she'd barely touched. Her reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, too pale, too tense. She hadn't slept well since the HR investigation began. Too many questions, too many whispered accusations, too many eyes watching her walk the halls like she was the fuse that lit Derek Holloway's downfall. She flinched when the cafe door opened. Derek stormed inside, coat unbuttoned, hair tousled from the wind, eyes wild with desperation. He spotted her instantly and marched toward her without hesitation. "Why the hell aren't you answering your phone?" he hissed, dropping into the seat across from her. Vanessa's voice trembled despite her attempt at cold composure. "You need to leave, Derek. I told you we're done." "You think you can wash your hands of this?" he snapped. "You dragged HR into our business." "Our business?" she whispered sharply. "Derek, I came to you for mentorship. You turned it into something else. You made promises you never intended to keep." He scoffed. "You wanted those promises." She stiffened. "I wanted a career. You offered shortcuts, and like an idiot, I believed you." People at nearby tables turned subtly in their seats, lowered their phones, listened. Vanessa's voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "You used me. You used Grace. You used everyone." Derek leaned in, breath hot with anger. "Grace is weak. She always has been. And you? You owe me for what I did for your career." Vanessa flinched, shame flashing across her face, but only for a moment. Then something changed in her eyes, something sharp, something fed by fear, guilt, and months of buried resentment. "No," she said firmly. "I don't owe you anything." Derek laughed coldly. "Everyone owes me, you included." "Not anymore," Vanessa whispered. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small USB drive, silver, scratched at the edges. She placed it gently on the table between them. "What's that?" Derek demanded. "My insurance," she whispered. "Recordings, screenshots, transcripts, everything you said to me, everything you pressured me to do, I sent copies to HR. And if anything happens to me..." She swallowed hard. "They go straight to federal investigators." Derek's face drained of color. He reached across the table as if to snatch the USB, but Vanessa shoved it back into her purse before he could touch it. "You're out of control," she said. "And you're dangerous. I'm not going down with you." "You think you can threaten me?" Derek growled, voice rising. Vanessa stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "It's not a threat," she said quietly. "It's a boundary." She stepped away quickly, but before she reached the door, she paused and looked back, not with love nor regret, but with a numb clarity. "You destroyed Grace. You tried to destroy me too, but now it's your turn, Derek." She left the cafe without another word. Derek remained frozen in his seat, fists trembling. Eyes blazing with a fury that could melt steel. Customers whispered. Phones recorded discreetly. His world was collapsing piece by piece, and now even his mistress had turned into a witness. And for the first time, Derek realized he wasn't just losing control. He was losing his grip on reality. And what Derek did next, reckless, furious, and unhinged, would push the entire war into its most dangerous chapter yet. The courthouse in downtown Boston towered like a stern guardian over the winter streets, its stone pillars dusted with snow. Inside, the halls echoed with the steady shuffle of lawyers, clerks, and the quiet murmur of families bracing for judgment. Grace walked through those doors with Noah nestled against her chest, Calvin at her side, and Lena just a step behind. Her hands trembled, but her spine stayed straight. Today was the preliminary hearing, the day Derek would finally face the truth. Inside the courtroom, the air was cold enough to sting. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, sat at the bench, flipping through documents silently. Derek entered moments later, escorted by his attorney. His hair was unkempt, his tie crooked, his confidence cracked. When he spotted Grace, something dark flickered behind his eyes. He expected fear. He found steel. The judge cleared her throat. "Let's begin." Samuel Hartley, Grace's attorney, stood. Calm, professional, deadly. Your Honor, we intend to present evidence of domestic abuse, financial coercion, identity fraud, and endangerment of both Grace Holloway and her minor child, Noah. Derek's attorney scoffed. These accusations are exaggerated. Samuel tapped the folder. I have a voicemail, Your Honor. He played it through a small speaker. She's nothing without me. Derek's face drained of color. The judge's expression hardened. Additionally, Samuel continued, we have hotel receipts, financial transfers to hidden accounts in Grace's name without her consent, audio files of Mr. Holloway discussing illegal redirection of funds, screenshots of workplace misconduct, and evidence of repeated emotional harm during and after pregnancy. Grace kept her gaze lowered, but her heart pounded as each piece fell into place. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Samuel opened a final file. Your Honor, we also submit a confidential report from Boston General's Ethics Board. Dr. Calvin Pierce discovered irregularities in NICU billing tied directly to Mr. Holloway. These funds were traced to an account created under Grace's identity, an account she never approved. Derek lunged forward. That's a lie. She's manipulating all of you. The judge raised a hand sharply. Mr. Holloway, one more outburst and you will be removed. He fell silent, chest heaving. Samuel continued, voice steady. Grace Holloway is not here to destroy Mr. Holloway. She is here to protect her child. Everything in this file represents choices Derek made, choices he now must answer for. The judge turned to Derek's attorney. Do you contest the validity of these documents? The attorney hesitated, flipping pages with trembling fingers. Your Honor, we need more time to review. The judge closed the file softly. No, you've had time. And the evidence is overwhelming. Grace felt her breath catch. Effective immediately, the judge announced, Grace Holloway is granted temporary full custody. Derek Holloway is restricted from contact until further review. He is also referred to federal authorities for investigation. Derek snapped. Grace, you can't do this. You're my wife. Grace stood slowly. Her voice was soft, but it echoed like thunder. I was your shadow, Derek, not your partner, not your wife, not in any way that mattered. He froze. And now, she whispered, I'm done being invisible. The judge struck the gavel, and with that single sound, Derek's entire empire of lies began to collapse, and Grace walked out of that courtroom one step closer to reclaiming her life. Derek stumbled out of the courthouse like a man waking from a nightmare he couldn't shake. The air outside was brutally cold, but he barely felt it. His world, once polished, controlled, obedient, was slipping through his fingers faster than he could grab it. Every breath crystallized in the air like a reminder he had no power left. The reporters were waiting. Flashes exploded. Microphones shoved toward him. Questions fired like bullets. Mr. Holloway, did you falsify financial records? Is it true your wife filed charges of domestic abuse? Were you using her identity to hide funds? Did your mistress submit evidence against you? Derek shoved past them, but it didn't matter. Their voices followed him, clinging to him like wet snow. His car slid dangerously when he pulled out of the parking lot, but he didn't care. He drove aimlessly, half blinded by frost, half blinded by rage, until he reached a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. The place smelled of bleach and loneliness. He dropped onto the stiff mattress, head pounding. A man like Derek had never been alone before. He didn't know how to be. The silence became unbearable. He pulled out his phone. No text from Madeline, no apology, no comfort, no begging him to come back. Instead, there was an email from the firm's executive board. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. He stared at the words until they blurred. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He panicked. He paced the room, muttering to himself. This is Grace's fault. She set me up. She turned everyone against me. But even his own voice sounded hollow. He opened a second email, this one from federal investigators requesting access to his personal financial records. The walls closed in. His chest tightened. His vision pulsed at the edges. He sank onto the carpet, gripping his hair, trying not to scream. The truth was undeniable. Grace hadn't destroyed him. He had destroyed himself, and she finally stopped shielding him from the consequences. A knock echoed through the room. 3 slow, deliberate strikes. Derek froze. "Who is it?" A voice answered through the thin door. "Mr. Holloway, it's Detective Ramos with Financial Crimes. We need to speak with you." No, not now. Not this soon. He backed away from the door as if the sound alone could burn him. His knees hit the bed frame. "I have nothing to say," he shouted. "We can come back with a warrant," the detective replied coolly. "Your cooperation would be wise." Footsteps receded. Silence returned. But it wasn't relief. It was a countdown. He grabbed a bottle from the bedside table and took a long swig, trying to drown the rising hysteria. But the burn didn't bring numbness. It brought clarity, ugly clarity. He saw Grace's face in the courtroom, not broken, not pleading, but strong, unshaken, surrounded by people who believed her, people who protected her, people who replaced him. His phone buzzed again. A notification from social media, a trending post, a blurry photo of him being escorted out of the firm by security. Caption: "The Fall of Derek Holloway." He stared at it until his vision warped. His life, his name, his identity, unraveled in real time. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the rage, beneath the denial, beneath the ego, a small, horrifying realization surfaced. He had lost Grace. He had lost his son. He had lost everything. And all that was left was the crash. And in the darkness of that motel room, Derek's final mistake, his most reckless yet, was already forming in his mind. A mistake that would push the story into its most explosive ending. Snow was melting along the banks of the Charles River, leaving thin trails of water that glimmered in the early spring sunlight. Boston felt different now, softer, warmer, almost reborn. And so was Grace. Her apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and clean laundry as she moved through the living room, rocking Noah gently in her arms. Sunlight warmed her face. Months ago, she couldn't imagine peace like this, breathing without fear, walking without flinching, loving without apology. Yet here she was, alive in every sense she once thought she had lost. That morning, her lawyer Samuel called. "Grace," he said, voice calm but triumphant. "It's over. The federal charges were accepted. Derek accepted a plea deal. He'll be serving time." Grace's breath caught, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was release. She whispered, "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Samuel replied. "You saved yourself." She hung up slowly, absorbing the truth. Derek, once her captor in a house that looked like a dream, was now trapped in a place he couldn't manipulate, a place built for men who believed they were above consequences. A gentle knock at her door broke the moment. Calvin stood outside, holding a small bouquet of white tulips, simple, elegant, nothing like the flashy displays Derek once used to gloss over cruelty. Calvin never forced presence. He offered it. Grace stepped aside to let him in, smiling softly as he brushed snow off his shoulders. "You okay?" he asked. Grace nodded. "Yes." For the first time in years, yes. They sat on the couch while Noah babbled in Grace's lap. Calvin watched him with quiet joy before turning back to her. "Samuel told me," he said. "How do you feel?" Grace exhaled slowly. "Free." Calvin touched her hand gently. "You earned that." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It felt like the warm pause between heartbeats, an understanding too deep for words. Grace looked down at their intertwined fingers, her pulse steady, calm. "Calvin," she said softly, "I don't know what the future looks like." He squeezed her hand gently. "That's okay. I just want to be someone who walks beside you, not ahead of you, not controlling, just beside." Something inside her, the part that had been wounded for so long, finally loosened. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't rush. Just stayed. Hours later, she took Noah for a walk along the river. Calvin came too, pushing the stroller with gentle ease. The world looked different, the kind of different that comes after surviving a storm you never believed you could endure. Grace paused on the bridge, watching sunlight ripple across the water. Once she believed suffering was the price of love. Now, she understood love never demanded suffering. Love was steady. Love was safe. Love was chosen, freely, without fear. Calvin stepped beside her, eyes soft. "You ready for the next chapter?" Grace smiled, a real radiant smile that reached all the way to her eyes. She lifted Noah into her arms, holding him against her heart. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm ready." And as they walked forward, Grace, Noah, and the man who helped her rediscover her strength, the past fell behind them like old snow melting into the river. Because Grace Holloway didn't just survive, she rebuilt, she rose, and she finally stepped into a future she chose, for herself, and for the son who would grow up knowing what true love looks like. And just like that, our story comes to a close. But you're still here, aren't you? If you've stayed with me until this very moment, then something in Grace's journey must have touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you that no matter how dark things get, you always have the power to rise again. Maybe it whispered to you that love should never hurt, and that healing, real healing, begins the moment you choose yourself. The Stoic Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Grace's pain didn't stop her. It became the path that led her to freedom, dignity, and a future she finally deserved. And that's the lesson for all of us. Your worth isn't determined by who tries to break you, but by the courage you show when you stand back up. Storms don't define you. How you rise after them does. So if this story moved you even a little, if it made you think, or breathe deeper, or feel seen, then let's stay connected. Give this video a like, share it with someone who might need strength today, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You're not alone. And your next chapter, it can be beautiful too.